Today, we're going to talk about the brand new Tier 6 premium Italian destroyer, the FR25. I'll show you my commander build at the conclusion of this battle, and we'll begin by running down the ship's stats, but keep in mind that these stats are influenced by my commander build. So to begin with, the FR25 has a whopping 21,280 hit points when you use a full-level William Sims as an inspiration. That is quite a lot of hit points for a Tier 6 destroyer. For the guns, it's got 5 139mm guns, which I think are the same size as the French, and that's no coincidence because this particular vessel is basically a Guépard-class French destroyer that flies under the Italian flag. So it's got 5 guns, they've got a range of 10.7 kilometers, a reload of 6.3 seconds, turret traverse time of 13.3, maximum HE shell damage of 2,000 with a 9% fire chance, very much the same as the French, and then they also shoot sap, and the sap does a maximum shell damage of 2,700. The sap is devastating, and that's part of the reason I wanted to show you this game, which is not going to be the highest damage game in the world, but it is going to be interesting, and it's going to show off the two things I most wanted to show you about this destroyer, which are number 1, the torpedoes versus battleships, and number 2, the guns versus enemy destroyers. Speaking of the torpedoes, this thing has 2 triple launchers, so 6 in total. They reload in 80 seconds, which is pretty fast, just a minute and 20. And they have a maximum torpedo damage of 14,833, which is a lot higher than your typical Italian torpedoes. It's actually approaching French levels of damage. Their detectability is 1.4 km. Now, they only have a 6-kilometer range, but they do go at 68 knots, so they are close-range torpedoes. The AA defense sucks, and we'll see that a little bit later due to the CV. The maneuverability is 36 knots base. It's got a 4.9-second rudder shift and a 690-meter turning circle. It's also got this engine boost, which can push it up near, well, above 40 knots. I think near 45, actually, if you're going in a straight line, so it's quite fast. And then the concealment with my build is 5.4 kilometers, and with the torpedoes at a 6-kilometer range, you get a little bit of a window for stealth firing, but it helps if the battleships are sailing toward you. So we've already seen the engine boost in action. We can see how fast the destroyer is going. There is one more consumable to cover, and that is the trademark Italian exhaust smoke. The FR25 gets 4 of them, so in some ways it can almost be like a little down-tiered version of the Paolo Emilio, although I haven't really gotten an opportunity to use it in a YOLO manner, except for sort of here. So we see the Tennessee is coming in. We're able to launch the torpedoes from stealth, but we do get spotted. No problem, we just deploy the smoke. We don't shoot at the Tennessee. We're hoping that he didn't notice that we were spotted next to him and that these torpedoes are going to make contact. The smoke screen lasts for 30 seconds when you deploy it, so that's a fair amount of time. And it can be a useful thing if you need to disengage like this, or if you're going to, try to YOLO a battleship, but it can also be a liability. You don't want to deploy it in an area where you're going to, for example, get spotted by radar, or else by sonar, because once you deploy the smoke screen, you're stuck in it for all 30 seconds. You can't get out if you need to spot, say, an enemy destroyer that's sonaring you or a cruiser that's radaring you. You're stuck until the smoke screen runs out. So it is both an asset and a liability. Be careful how you deploy it. In any case, we did manage to hit the Tennessee with our torpedoes, and we've got a cluster of battleships up here that we'd like to get more torpedoes on. We've got a Queen Elizabeth and a Sinop both sailing in. We've got 3 charges of the smoke screen left, and the next one is just over a minute off of cooldown, but we do have a problem, and that is the enemy aircraft carrier, the Ranger. This thing has absolutely no AA defense to speak of. We're, I think, deploying our AA here against the Ranger, or if we're not, we're going to shortly, and he's going to hover these planes over us for quite a long time, and we're going to fail to shoot down any number of significance. This thing just cannot defend itself, and when you've got a CV doing this, it... Honestly, I don't want to rant about CVs in this video, but it does feel really unfair. This guy is just hovering his planes around me with absolutely no downside whatsoever. His battleships are free to shoot at me, and he's free to drop me, and he has no risk to himself at all, except for the fact that maybe some of these AA guns will finally start to work and take down a plane or two, and then he's got to wait a full 60 seconds or whatever before the magic factory under his flight deck generates another plane. So he's got these things hovering over us, just spotting us for these battleships to damage, and he damages us himself. It is BS. No other ship can interact with this destroyer in this way. If this was an enemy destroyer spotting me in this situation, I'd be spotting him in return and shooting him, and he'd at least be losing HP for it. The CV, not at all. So finally we get one of our smoke screens back and we deploy it just to make sure the CV does not spot us. We've lost a lot of HP because of him, and we notice that near our base there are two enemy destroyers practically knocking on the door. They've only got, I think, a Bayern to go through in order to get into the base. So we've turned around, we've abandoned our pursuit of trying to torpedo those battleships. It's just not going to happen. What we can do instead, and what we should do, is defend our base from the encroachment of these two destroyers. It's a Gajimata and an Akatsuki. And of course, this Bayern, well, he's just sitting there, so he's kind of a sitting duck. They could easily torpedo him, and we want to try to prevent that, but not only that, we want to prevent them from going into the base. So the Fubuki, almost coming around the corner, he's thinking better of it. He's like, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to drive out right in front of a battleship, but I will launch my torpedoes at him. So the Fubuki does. There's the torps. He launches them on maybe not the right angle, because they're not all going to hit that Bayern. The Bayern is going to do a fairly successful job of dodging and only take, well, it looks like 2. So I guess they do hit. But in any case, that's when the Gajimata decides to come around. And those torpedoes we launched a moment ago, they were for the Fubuki, but they'll work just as well on the Gajimata. He goes down for our first kill of the game. And then Fubuki's coming out next. After having seen the Gajimata go down, Gajimata does get the kill on the Bayern, but we do get a good hit on the Fubuki, and you can kind of see how devastating this sap is against destroyers. In a 1v1 fight, you can take out a lot of DDs, especially since you've got a pretty robust health pool. The reload, of course, on these guns is slow. Pretty much everything has a faster reload than you do, except for things like the Akatsuki and IJN torpedo boats. But even so, the sap hits so hard that it makes up for the slower reload. And if you're in a 1v1 fight with this thing, you have to respect it. You've got to be careful. You don't want to give it flat broadside so the sap can get easy penetrations. Remember, you can, in fact, ricochet sap. You have to be giving it the most narrow angle possible. And you want to make yourself a smaller target, too, if you find this thing shooting at you in a destroyer. Because the guns, I've noticed, are not exactly pinpoint accurate. There's some dispersion to these shells, so they will land all around the ship in some cases. But in any case, we've seen the efficacy of the torpedoes in tandem with the smoke screen on this destroyer, and we've seen the sap guns on the enemy destroyers, both quite good. I think this destroyer is pretty fun to play. It's a pretty unique premium, and honestly, after playing a few games in it, I would highly recommend it. I would also highly recommend attempting to get vengeance on any CV that does you wrong, and that's what we're going to do to end this match. Basically, we've got it all wrapped up after taking out that Gajimata and the Fubuki. The enemy team has no destroyers left, and they're down to 2 battleships and their CV versus all 3 of our destroyers, 2 battleships, and our CV. So we've got the Ranger near the enemy base. He's kind of hiding out behind that island, and in fact his bow is facing the gap between these 2 islands in front of us, so we should be able to sail forward and intercept him. We're deploying a smokescreen just in case his planes spot us. We don't want the Synop turning his guns this way to take us out. He could theoretically wreck us in a single salvo with only 7,500 hit points left, and we don't want to take any chances. We want this enemy CV to go down, because frankly, at this point, it is personal. He was kind of making the game difficult for me a little bit earlier with all his unrisky spotting that he did, so he deserves some comeuppance, I think. Don't you think? Let me know in the chat. In any case, we're about to round the corner here and spot him, although there is a Queen Elizabeth quite close, so very good chance we could go down. Even if we do, though, I doubt the enemy team has a snowball's chance in hell of winning. My team would deliberately have to scuttle their ships against the enemy's guns in order for this game to end in a loss. So we see the Ranger, we get the torps on target. Queen Elizabeth apparently was ready for us, which honestly I wasn't expecting. And then of course the Ranger's secondaries are, for whatever reason, pretty dang accurate. So they do take us out, but we get the last laugh with our torpedoes on the Ranger. We take him out as our third kill of the game, and that's the end of proceedings. Not a lot of damage done, only 62,000, but I think this game gave you a good taste of both the torpedoes and the guns in action, which is primarily what I wanted to show you. It's not all about fancy damage numbers and the like, and because of the guns and the smoke screen and the speed and the torpedoes of this thing, I think it is quite the effective tier 6 destroyer. And even if it's not maybe the most competitive one out there, it is fun to play. And I think that counts for a lot. So I would recommend this premium. It is pretty good. And I look forward to continuing to play it. Maybe we'll make a couple more videos on it. In any case, the game is wrapped up. Only the Queen Elizabeth is left. And it's going to take my teammates, only a few more minutes to finish him off. So I think we'll skip ahead. We'll take a look at my commander build and we'll end the proceedings for today. And now we'll take a look at the leaderboard real quick before we get to the commander build. We end the game with only 60,000 damage done, but we're second on the leaderboard behind the Chad Colorado with 2,000 base XP, so certainly not a bad game. As for the build, the mod selection, we've got Aiming Systems Mod 1, the Propulsion Mod, and of course Concealment. Commander is Luigi Rizzo with Eric Bay and William Sims as inspirations. We've got Observant Range, we've got Look at Me Now, we've got Twist and Track, Smoke on the Water, and finally Unstoppable. I think it's a sort of a gun-focused build that works quite well for this destroyer, and again, I would highly recommend this one. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.